My name is Bob Ejike, and I was born and raised in war. When I was a child, my people of the southeast of Nigeria, the eastern region, decided to break away to form their own independent country of Biafra. And we were told that the reason was, well, we could date the reason back to history because the British, like most colonialists, using a tourist map in the Berlin Conference, cut off Africa, partitioning of Africa, Britain, you take Ghana and Uganda and Nigeria, Portugal, you take Angola, Equatorial Guinea. France, you have Chad, you have Cote d'Ivoire. This is your own. So it was like a cake being cut, and no, they didn't take cognizance of the ethnicity of the people. So tribes were cut into half. They were halved, and for example, the Yorubas, uh, uh, they cut from Badagry, and so you had Yoruba in Nigeria, Yoruba in Benin Republic, Yoruba in Togo, and other places. And now they came to put ethnicities together that had very little in common. So this difference showed the most between the North and South, because the North were Muslims, the South were Christians. And Muslims with an Arabic culture, from the Sahara, and the Christians with animist background that eventually converted to Christianity and were therefore chasing with single-mindedly Western education and trade. I'm referring to the Igbos. And then the Northerners already had a monarchy, and the Quran, Islam was very important to them. And the sheikhs or the sultans, emirs, ruled through Islam. This was quite a conflict, with the South. And well, the nations did try to come together and form a country, and Nigeria is still struggling with that. Well, what happened was there was a conflict between Chief Obafemi Awolowo, who had effectively nominated Akintola as premier of the West while he went into opposition. After Tafawa Balewa became the prime minister, and Tafawa Balewa was effectively under the control of the Sadona of Sokoto, Sir Ahmadu Bello. And so a breach of trust took place between Awolowo and Akintola. And Akintola formed an alliance with Ahmadu Bello and Tafawa Balewa, the prime minister. And Awolowo was arrested and charged for treason. Akintola was said to have rigged the election, and the people reacted violently by attacking and burning the supporters of Akintola and vice versa. And in a riot, a violent riot called Operation Waiting. Now, a number of majors in the Nigerian army, I believe there were 5 in number, led by Emmanuel Ifeajuna or Chukwuma Kaduna Nzogwu. It's still in dispute who was the actual leader between the two. These were very charismatic young men, very well trained, and they decided to solve this problem by carrying out a military coup and taking over the government of the Federation. It was a very bloody coup. And in the process, these young men killed the Sadona of Sokoto, Sir Ahmadu Bello, and the Prime Minister, Tafawa Balewa, Festus Okotiebo, the Minister of Finance, a number of top-ranking military personnel who were mostly from the north. And because the leaders of this coup were Southern Igbos, the Northerners saw the coup as an Igbo coup. And as a result, there was a counter coup which was headed by Yakubu Gowon, and it was successful. Ironsi, who had taken power after countering the Nzogwu coup, was eliminated in the coup, and there was a spontaneous, or what looked like a spontaneous rioting in the north, and a lot of Igbos, thousands and thousands of Igbos who had nothing to do with it, who were not in the military, became victims of these ethnic riots, and many were killed. And then we saw a lot of refugees, those who had managed to escape the north. We saw people who without limbs, people without eyes, people whose stomachs had been, cut open, and that kind of terror. I saw that as a child. And this was a situation when these returnees, these refugees, went to Colonel Ojukwu, Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu, who was the governor of the Eastern region, and asked what they could do because they didn't have jobs anymore. And Ojukwu told them, just bring yourself home first, because a dead man has no need for jobs. So bring yourself home. And then he made an effort to protect the people. And I know that these riots happened twice, these killings, because initially there were assurances from Colonel Gowon that the Igbos would not be harmed anymore. And then they returned to their jobs, their previous homes in the north, and they were massacred the second time. And so this time Ojukwu said, please come home, everyone. And then when they came home, there was this refusal on the part of Ojukwu to obey Gowon, because he said Gowon was an usurper. He was not the most senior army officer in the Nigerian army, and therefore should not be the head of state. And he refused to take orders from Gowon. And rather, he made demands in Aburi in Ghana, where they held a meeting because Ojukwu wasn't ready to go to have meetings in the Nigerian side. Neither did Gowon feel safe to be in the eastern region holding a meeting. So they settled for neutral ground, which was Aburi in Ghana. And in Aburi, Ojukwu tabled the pressing issue of compensation for those who had lost lives and properties, and also some limited autonomy for the regions so that this kind of incident will not repeat. And he came away believing that Gowon had agreed to the terms. But we understand that when Gowon came back, his permanent secretaries read a different interpretation to the documents of Aburi and advised him against paying compensation and against giving this limited autonomy to the regions. And so what Gowon did next was unprecedented, and no one expected that, in a bid that was obvious to reduce the power of the eastern region. He created 12 states, cutting out the minorities from the Igbos, that is the southeastern minorities, that's creating Cross River State and River State. And with that single act, he divided the southeast, the eastern region, and Ojukwu had to act fast by declaring the region an independent country, Biafra. And that, I think, that the reason why Biafra was declared was the creation of states, so that the people will not be weakened. They will still be strong and together in demanding for their rights. And this was seen as an effrontery by the Nigerian government, and Gowon sent the troops in what he called a police action, and he must have strongly underestimated Biafra. And he said it was going to be quick. Don't worry, it's police action. It turned out that this police action was not an easy thing because it led to a war that lasted for 3 years and cost millions of lives, especially from starvation. We were living in Nsukka, where my father was working in the Internal Revenue, and my mother was running an institute, a fashion institute. She was teaching young ladies how to make dresses and how to design clothes. And so we had to pack and run like everybody else because Nsukka was one of the first sectors of work. And we moved to the village, and life continued in my village, Oba, in Anambra State, near Onitsha. And that's in Idemili. And so we were registered in primary school, central school. And for us children, life was exciting. It was a holiday, except that the war started to come closer to us. Bombing, strafing of civilians, rockets landing in the houses and destroying. A friend of my mother's was eating with her family. When the rocket landed, cut off her head, dumped her head in a pot of soup. And so, we had to build bunkers and stay in the bunkers at night. Sometimes these bunkers, which were built with palm trunks, during the rainy season, they got soaked and they could fall and kill entire families, that have been under the ground. On one occasion, I remember my elder sister said, let's sleep in the bunker tonight. She had a premonition of bombing. And my mother said no. And we slept in the house. And that night, the bunker collapsed. And we could have been killed. On another occasion, we slept in the bunker and our house was bombed. So we woke up the next day and saw shrapnel everywhere. Um, then my father was deployed, redeployed to Port Harcourt, and eventually he took us to this bustling, very exciting Nigerian town. And for me, it was a nice experience because I could see the sea for the first time, made new friends, and living in a big city. It was my first time being in a big city. I remember I saw spaghetti for the first time in the home of my great uncle Ikoku, and I thought it was a plate of worms. And everything was fine in Port Harcourt until the war came closer to us, and it was one devastating experience for all of us because Ojukwu had not informed the residents of Port Harcourt that there was an invasion. On the contrary, Radio Biafra announced um, that the troops were testing the new weapons that had arrived from China. But what actually happened was that we understand that Ojukwu had been advised by his rocket scientists that the soldiers fought better if the civilians were on the ground during battles. And so, who was advancing? It was an operation led by Colonel Benjamin Adekunle, the most dreaded officer in the Nigerian army, backed by Major Isaac Adaka Boro, a sworn Igbo-phobic. And so we were definitely going to die. There's no question about that. But Biafra did not have this ammunition to defend the country. And the enemy was arriving by land, air, and sea, and we were not informed. So, but some riverine indigenes who were close to the Nigerian forces, because for them they had become part of Nigeria with the creation of state. Some of them were not Biafrans at heart. But some were kind to us because we were neighbors, and they informed us of the impending invasion. So my father and his friend, Mr. Oredu, decided to put both families together into a truck, taking cocoa to the hinterland, the Igbo hinterland, and we were packed inside this truck. And then hidden among sacks of cocoa. Now, what we understand is that the riverine people were blocked the road, all roads leading out of Port Harcourt, so that the Igbos would stay in Port Harcourt and face the enemy. which means we were not allowed to escape. But so you can imagine the whole town trying to leave, and there are bottlenecks of machete welding um, villagers shouting, "Landlord, Inabago, landlord, landlord, are you going home?" Had been this insinuation that the Igbos had taken over the river state by owning many houses and working hard and making a lot of money and buying property became a crime for which you had to be killed. And so um, they were abandoning their buildings, but the people were not satisfied with just taking over the buildings. They wanted the landlords dead. So two things were happening. There was a war and there was a revolution all happening, and we were in the middle of it. And so we were driven outside the town. At a point, we got to one roadblock, and they discovered us while searching. They discovered that we were there, women and children. The men were kind to an extent. They said, "You women get down and return to Port Harcourt. The children can continue." So the women got down and started walking back to town. At some point, when they didn't see the men anymore, they entered the bushes and started tracking themselves through the bushes, finding their way if they could get out of Port Harcourt environs. So my mother told us a harrowing tale, because if you dared to enter the bush, then you were killed very, very easily by these very aggressive natives. But anyway, they were assisted by some kind gentleman and eventually found their way. When we got to the second roadblock, they discovered us and flogged and tortured the driver thoroughly for attempting to take away these Igbo children. And then they made him to make a U-turn and return us to Port Harcourt. So this was a town under invasion. People were running helter-skelter. There was confusion everywhere. There was bombing, shooting, and rioting. No one understood who was rioting against who. I saw for the first time in my life a man butchered and the leg lifted, the bleeding leg lifted like a trophy by a group of women in protest march. We were dumped in a petrol station at the center of Port Harcourt somewhere, and we were allowed to sit inside the office waiting for our death. So as we were waiting, the children were crying and calling out the names of their parents. The children of Oredu were shouting, "Oredu, please come and save us. Oredu." And as God will have it, Mr. Oredu and my father, now that it was clear that there was an invasion, were driving away, going home, trying to leave Port Harcourt in their Volkswagen, Mr. Oredu's Volkswagen Beetle, white. And they stopped over to buy fuel, and all of a sudden, this man heard his name because his son was crying and calling out his name. So he came out of the car and looked in the office and he screamed. We thought these children had gotten home. And behold, we were here. Behold, we were here still in the town. So he came out and took all of us and then carried us and into the car, and we started the journey to the east, to the eastern hinterland. Um, Eventually, there were too many refugee vehicles leaving the town that even the villagers could not stop the movement because the Igbos were in such large number, they had to let us pass. And eventually, we arrived at Owerri, slept in a camp, and then continued. The story will continue later. Thank you.